I'm going to call this my Ripple and XRP rant. For those of you that want to learn kind of in a nutshell what's going on. There's so much information, lots of speculation. Some things are right, some things are wrong. I'm going to break it all down. I'm just going to do this as quickly as I can. I'm Brian, big dumb animal. Don't do what I do. That's my disclaimer, informational purposes only. All right. If you go to my channel, you'll see that I've actually got a playlist just for this. I started doing research on Ripple and XRP quite a while ago. And the reason I did it was because I didn't like what some information was coming out and saying. It was a little confusing. Thankfully, over probably the last year, I can say that from what I see online, people are starting to understand, for example, that XRP and Ripple are two completely different things. There was some confusion there. Okay. Let's talk about some background. Let's talk about what's recently happened and where this may go. I'm going to start with as many facts as I can. 2012, OpenCoin, I believe was the name of the company, and I think that's the right year, give or take a year, was started and eventually turned into Ripple, which I think happened the next year. The founders of the XRPL, the ledger, and the cryptocurrency XRP, I believe, started around the same time. They had 100 billion XRP. As you know, that's the fixed supply amount. They kept 20 billion for themselves. And then the 80 billion, I believe, went to Ripple, some of which I think stayed within the company and used for various reasons. And 55 billion went into an escrow. The idea being that 1 billion XRP would be released on a monthly basis for 55 months. When that 1 billion comes out, it's sold. It goes into circulation. The money that is received goes to Ripple, the company. Okay. Now, 1 billion comes out. They can sell it. They can utilize it, I believe, in any way, such as maybe just give it out to purchase a company or something, or they can put it back into escrow. Because as you can imagine, if XRP is worth $1 and 1 billion XRP comes out, that's $1 billion Ripple would receive in 1 month. That's a lot. I'm guessing that's more than their operating budget. They don't need that much. So typically, they only sell a couple 100 million, I believe, and the rest they put back into escrow. What does that mean? The escrow lasts 55 months if 1 billion a month is gone. But if they put some back into escrow, it extends the escrow and keeps extending it. So right now, I believe they say that at the current rate, it'll last another 7 to 8 years. All right. You're all familiar with the fact that there was a lawsuit. And the SEC went after Ripple. Now, people will give you all kinds of reasons why it's such a great tech. The government wanted to stop it and all that kind of stuff. That's not my understanding. From what I saw, it was simply this. If you have a company, a private company like Ripple, and you sell shares in the company, the person who buys the share has a right, title, and interest to a percentage of Ripple, right? You're buying a share in the company. That falls under SEC laws. Ripple sold XRP, a cryptocurrency. SEC said you're using it like a security. XRP is a security. You're selling it to raise money for your company. Ripple said, yes, we're selling it to raise money for our company. However, the person who buys XRP has no right, title, or interest to anything in Ripple. They do not get a share of Ripple. They do not get any ownership of Ripple. What happened? Ripple won. Valid argument. Yeah, they purchased it, but they don't get any value for it. They just get that cryptocurrency. It worked. Now, there's another issue which I believe might still be open because that was retail and they also sold it to brokers, and that's a different issue. But that's essentially the lawsuit case. Now, they've been in business for about 13 years. Originally, and for probably about 13 years, Ripple has always said that they're going to do two things utilizing XRP. I believe one was to create currencies. That didn't work out. Two, bank transfers, large transfers between banks. And that's why you'll see a lot of people talk about the valuation and how high one XRP can go. And the idea is simply this. If a bank needs to transfer billions of dollars, then they need to buy a certain amount of XRP. XRP's price will have to go up if there's X number of transactions in a given day. If there's $1 trillion worth of bank transfers in a given day and they're all using XRP, they can't possibly all hold the same XRP at the same time, so the price will go up. That's how they got their valuation models. As of right now, I have never seen any official Ripple documents or sources that say how much bank transfers have occurred using XRP. That's just a fact. If you have, feel free to let me know. I will address one that comes up at the end. All right. So now you know. Ripple is a private company that has shareholders. It received investment a while ago. We're going to talk about some new investment in a second. Those investors gave money to Ripple and they got some shares. People buy XRP on the open market and every month more comes out of escrow and then it's given to Ripple. Okay, now that we know the background, let's think about the scenarios. There are 4 scenarios. Ripple does extremely well, the company, and XRP does extremely well. Scenario 1. Ripple fails, XRP fails. Scenario 2. Ripple does well, XRP doesn't. Scenario 3. XRP does great, Ripple doesn't. Scenario 4. There you have it. Broke it down, real simple, 4 scenarios, each one independent of the other. You got to understand that XRP could fail and Ripple could do very well, or vice versa, or they both do great. But they are independent. Now, there are some arguments people will say why they're interdependent, but they are completely independent. Okay, so let's give Ripple the benefit of the doubt. For the last 13 years, they've been saying interbank transfers. However, it's always bothered me that they won't tell us how much. Now, why might that be? Speculation. That might be because they hold, currently I think over 30 billion XRP is still in escrow. If someone were to find out and they told the world, you know what, we're really not using XRP. Banks really aren't using XRP. We thought they were going to do it. They didn't do it. It's really not that useful. It can be used to pay for transactions on the ledger when people are using some of our other services, custody and all this other stuff. But for the most part, we thought people were going to be buying it like banks and using it to transfer using what's called RippleNet and ODL, the on-demand liquidity, but they're not doing that. So if they came out and said that, what would happen? Well, the price of XRP might go down quite a bit, which means what they have in escrow goes down quite a bit, which is what they use, I believe, to pay for things like operating expenses and acquiring companies. So to give Ripple the benefit of the doubt, startup companies are not easy. And yes, it's been around for 13 years, but it's still a startup company in technology, which isn't an easy industry, very competitive, and in cryptocurrency, which is a brand new industry, changes every day. Feels like it. So it appears as though Ripple may have changed their business model, which is not uncommon for startups. Again, startups are difficult. They think they're going to do one thing. The next thing you know, they got to pivot and do something else. That's just smart business. If that's not working, go do that. Okay, I'm not saying XRP is not working, but they haven't said anything. So what have they done recently? Well, if you look at this post here, acquisitions. They've acquired Hidden Road, Rail, G Treasury. So those are a couple acquisitions, which is an interesting pivot. And what do I mean by that? Well, what they've been trying to do for 13 years is get all these banks to use their solution, RippleNet and ODL, and use XRP to transfer, and that was going to be their business. Well, they probably realized, again, speculation, they've got all this money, billions of dollars a month. They're currently just spending it on things like PR and marketing, put ads in New York, Times Square, try to get TV stations to put Brad Garlinghouse on so he can talk about it, right? They're just doing those sort of things, but as a business, they weren't executing. So they did something that I think was very smart. And this might turn the tables for Ripple 100%. They turned themselves into what's called a rollup. A rollup is essentially where you typically go out and you raise a bunch of money and you say, we're going to dominate this industry. We're going to buy that company, that company, that company, and that company. 4 companies for $1 billion each. They're each worth $1 billion. But if we pull them all together, because they're in the same industry, but they do slightly different things, we think the sum of the parts is going to be greater than the individual parts themselves. So yes, they're each worth $4 billion and there's 4 of them. But together, we're going to get economies of scale. We're going to get some efficiencies. We're going to be able to reduce staff. We're going to be able to increase our margins, etc. And therefore, those 4 companies that cost us $4 billion will make our company, which acquired them, worth $7 billion. That's a roll-up. Ripple is executing a roll-up strategy. I think that might make Ripple extremely valuable. They also still have this war chest of XRP that they can sell, whether or not that really works out. Now, here's what's interesting. Just recently, Ripple announces $500 million strategic investment led by these 3 different companies, and they gave Ripple the company a valuation of $40 billion. Now, if you look at CoinMarketCap, you'll see that the market cap of XRP is $133 billion. Fully diluted value, which is 100 billion XRP coins times the current price of $2.22, gets you to 222 billion. And you may say to yourself, why is Ripple valued at 40 billion and XRP is 220 billion fully diluted? Just goes to show that they are 2 separate and completely separate entities. All right. Now, what's interesting about this 40 billion, that means that they got some investors to give them $500 million. Ripple gave them shares of Ripple. Ripple now has the $500 million. They valued the company at 40 billion. Now, you might say, and some people are speculating, why 40 billion? Well, come on. It's next to impossible to put a value on a startup. It's just really difficult. It's not until you actually have revenue coming in and you can look at the net gross revenue, the net revenue, EBITDA, and all that stuff, and then projected future earnings where you can actually come up with a valuation. They had to come up with something. It is interesting, though, because at $2.22 and a little over 30 billion XRP in escrow, they have escrow worth around $70 billion. So theoretically, you could buy the company for 40 billion, sell the XRP for 70 billion. People are going to say, well, it's an escrow. It takes time to come out, but you can actually sell your rights to the escrowed amount. And Schwartz, Joel Katz Schwartz, actually stated that in one of his posts for some odd reason. He said, we could actually sell our right to what's in escrow, which I thought was interesting. A little disconcerting because why would they sell their future right to it? Usually you only do that if you think it's going to go down. But regardless, so this $40 billion number is very interesting, and it's got people speculating on both sides of the aisle, so to speak. Some saying, well, 40 billion doesn't make sense because they have 70 billion in XRP. They just got discounted XRP. And then others saying, well, 40 billion, that's probably low because look, they bought these other companies. They're doing X, Y, and Z. We don't really know what they're doing, but they're trying to create this roll up. Now, another thing I want to show you, and I think this is very important, because you're making an investment decision. Ripple's not public, so you're not buying it. And by the way, they keep saying they're not going to go public. In my opinion and speculation, I believe they're not going to go public because if they did, they would have to tell us everything. They would have to tell how much XRP is being used on a monthly, quarterly, and yearly basis. And if those numbers aren't good, it would decrease the value of XRP, and that could decrease their escrow. So they really can't go public, in my opinion. Plus, why would they? They can sell $1 billion a month at $2.22 currently, which is over $2 billion a month in free-flowing cash. They don't need to. They're using that money to go acquire. Look online when you read things and be very careful. This gentleman here who I like, I'll keep his name out of it, but he said $95 billion. He says, here's an update. $95 billion in payment volume using XRP. That's what he said. And he referenced this article. In the article, it says, let me find it here. I had it a second ago. Payments have quickly become one of the most practical and scalable applications of crypto. Earlier this year, the company acquired stablecoin infrastructure company Rail, adding capabilities to Ripple Payments as a full-service cross-border platform, using Ripple USD and XRP to make global money movement faster and more efficient for businesses. Okay. They explicitly put two words in the same sentence, which drives me crazy. Ripple USD and XRP. So this gentleman said, because they had announced 95 billion, he said using XRP. That is not true. It might be true, but it's not what Ripple said. Ripple said they moved 95 billion in payment volume using a combination of RUSD, and XRP. It could be 100%, it could be 99% XRP and 1% RUSD. It could be 99% RLUSD and 1% XRP. So again, I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying make sure you read and look at the details. There is a lot of misinformation. Most people don't do it on purpose. They just read something, they get excited, they post it, and they don't realize that they may have missed something. Like they didn't say it was 95 billion using XRP. So that was my rant. I just want you to understand when you're buying XRP, what you're purchasing. It's XRP, the cryptocurrency. It's not Ripple, the company. Ripple, the company could survive. XRP could survive. Neither of them, either one of them. It all depends, but they are separate. So just understand that Ripple, the company, may be doing a pivot and they may be pivoting to be more of a roll-up. Now, it's interesting because let's say this one scenario where for 13 years, all the banks said, we don't want to use your XRP. Stop asking us. We're not doing it. And then Ripple said, you know what? The banks aren't using it. So, and these other companies aren't using it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go buy the companies that the banks use. And then we're going to make those companies use it because we own them. That might be a winning strategy. It's possible that Ripple, using the money from the sales of XRP, is acquiring companies, rolling them up, and those companies are the infrastructure and the rails for payments that institutions and banks use. And then Ripple, since they own them, say, well, you're going to integrate XRP and use the XRPL, the ledger. And therefore, the banks will end up using them in institutions, even though initially they didn't want to or weren't. That could be the strategy. That was it. I hope that was helpful. I hope that helped straighten out some of the issues between XRP and Ripple so you know the differences. It's always important to know what you own. It's also important to understand that probably 99% of what you read online about XRP and Ripple is from a third party. Most of it is not from a Ripple source. They very rarely put out any information. Mostly the information they'll put out is, hey, we just raised some money. Or, hey, we just bought this company. And that's kind of it. Everything else is just speculation and guessing. Hope that was helpful. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Love how I break things down? Then hop into my crypto school. You'll get step-by-step courses on everything. Buying, selling, staking for yield, borrowing, lending, even going fully debanked. Plus, join lively crypto chats and catch my daily market updates. And lastly, if you just want to help support the channel, there's a join button just below this video.